You've heard me say it, you've heard every other jazz pedagogue online and in person say it, you've heard all the greats say it. If you want to improve as an improviser, you have to invest heavily in listening. Now, this is both very focused and intensive listening activities, such as transcribing, but this also might be sort of general listening of just making sure you're exposing yourself to a regular diet of great players and a variety of music. Now, for many players, this is the missing component in their practice and might be the reason why you are hitting a wall in your improvement. But listening on its own is not magic. It does teach us so many of the things that we need to learn as musicians, kind of regardless of style. However, if you're not taking concrete steps to move the things that you are hearing on recordings into your playing in the practice room, you're always going to be missing out on a huge opportunity to reach your full potential as a musician. What's up, everyone? Shawn Bell here. Today, we are going to dig into that question of how we get things from hearing them on recordings, taking them in the practice room to get them in our playing. We're going to explore this mostly through some stylistic elements of playing swing. If you want a little more like detailed work on this area of your musicianship, if you feel like playing swing is not necessarily automatic for you, I'd really encourage you to check out what's in the virtual studio this week. There's some sort of like, I hate to say rules, but definitely guidelines that will help you with this. And we're going to really break it down in detail there. Here in this week's YouTube lesson, we're going to really just use that as sort of the example, the backdrop of how we take things we hear in recordings and move them into our playing. So the first question we really got to ask ourselves is, why listening? Why is this the way we really want to transmit information to us as musicians? Well, it's just so effective. It works on the very detailed things that we want to work on. Hey, I want to learn this lick. I want to learn this tune. I want to learn this solo. That's the very like hyper detailed type of practice that we all have to do to really get the nuts and bolts of improvising together. But it's also extremely effective in the more broad-based elements of our playing. Things like sound. How can you ever get a great sound in this instrument if you never hear great players playing it? It's absolutely essential. Things like playing the style. How can we ever achieve an authentic type of swing feel by just thinking it's, a quarter note and an eighth note all with a triplet marker over it? That is a very approximation of what swing is. So we really need to listen to these things to make sure we're hearing them in a very tangible way. Where listening can sometimes fail for us as musicians is I think we sometimes think it's automatic, especially on these more broad-based things. I think everybody is really clear that, I got to go transcribe a solo, listen to it a lot, get in my playing, and that's going to help me improvise better. But when we talk about some of these big picture things, sound, maybe how do I construct a solo, things like style, we tend to lean on that sort of passive experience of listening. Like, well, yeah, I've listened to Count Basie. Of course I know what Count Basie sounds like. Or yeah, I've listened to somebody with a great sound that I really admire, J.J. Johnson or whoever. Of course that's going to be in there. In my experience, it really takes a little bit more than that to really make sure it's happening in your playing, because when the rubber hits the road and we're in a performance, we tend to revert back to the things that we have practiced the most and really invested time in. So if you haven't invested time in playing with a great consistent sound that you got from recordings, or you haven't invested time in playing swing in a very authentic and detail-oriented way, it's probably not going to be there when you actually want it in a performance. That's why we need to bridge the gap from just this sort of passive listening, where we're sort of absorbing the jazz language, and really get into the details so it is automatic when we perform. As I said, we are going to look at this more on the stylistic elements today rather than on improvisational elements. We are going to explore the tune Basie Straight Ahead. Now, this is on the album of the same name. To me, this is the absolute blueprint of how we play swing in a big band. Now, this is relatively late in Basie's recorded history, so there's a lot of variation there. You listen to him earlier, the swing feel is going to be a little bit different. Or even if you listen to Basie as compared to Ellington, they sort of swung differently. So it's not that this is the only way to do it. To me, this is the starting point. I think a very effective starting point, and this album in particular is where it's at for me. I would also add that when we're thinking about trying to become better improvisers and connect with the entire tradition of improvised music as well, all those great players came up playing in big bands for the most part. This is just a part of how this style developed. So even though we might want to sound like Charlie Parker or J.J. Johnson or John Coltrane, these players all played in big bands, and it was very integral to sort of how they play the style. Not to say they play exactly like those big bands, but it's definitely very informative to their style, and we want to connect with that. The real tool that we are going to use to take this stuff from the listening phase into the playing phase is using our voice and singing. Your voice is the best practice tool you have, especially when we're talking about learning from recordings, because we want to just think about emulating. Now, if we really want to get super detailed, and I do think that is useful here, we are going to use 3 syllables to help us understand swing and help us understand articulation. These are very, very common, especially in jazz education. We're going to think about a do. That's going to be anything that is a tenuto, a slur, or potentially something that if we were reading the music is maybe not marked, like an eighth note line, for example. We're going to use a sideways accent, a da, that is a long accented note. And then we're also going to use a dot, a short accented note. These are very, very common. We're going to delve into it super deep here. If you want a little bit more information here, like I said, go check out the virtual studio, or you can click on this lesson I released, gosh, like 5 or 6 years ago at this point, to get some more details there. There are also going to be a few ghosted notes in the examples today. So when I'm vocalizing those, I like to say an N, like my tongue, do, my tongue is actually up and I'm actually hearing the sound through my nose. That's not necessarily fully what we do when we ghost a note, but I think that really captures the sound of a ghosted note well. So we are going to use these to work through a couple of examples, and this is what you got to take into the practice room. Again, so this articulation and swing stuff is automatic. Our first example we are going to listen to is the melody section, the bridge of the melody section, where the brass sort of takes over the melody. So let's give it a listen. Now, if you were doing this actually in the practice room on your own, you would need to listen to this a number of times. Step 2 is to start to sing along with this recording, being very detailed to articulation. So for example, the first phrase here, we're going to start with a marcato. I don't know how it's written in the original Basie music for this. I just transcribed the lead part here, but I hear that as a dot. It's short and accent. Dot, do, dot. That is all those little like syncopated figures at the beginning of this. If we look at the end of the first 4 bars, we've got dot, do, 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 da, da, do, dot. So the end has slightly different articulation, and those type of details are where you really want to key in. And then when you're singing it along with the recording, making sure you are matching very exactly. The second phrase, the first 4 notes are all long. Da, 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 dot, do, dot, do, dot. Do da do dot. So then a mix of long and short notes in there. I would say almost every short note when we are playing swing is accented as well. Not literally 100%, but the vast majority of them are. So we're going to use dots for all those. So we're going to go to sing this with the recording as step 2. All right, here we go. Dot do 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 da da do dot. Da 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 do dot do dot do da do dot. Once you've invested a little time with the recording, it's time to actually get it on your horn. So I would say the first step in that process is to be able to sing it without the recording. You've really identified what notes are long, short, accented. Can you create all that swing when it's just you singing without the recording? Dot do 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 da da do dot. Da 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 dot do dot do dot do da do dot. If that's really internalized, then you want to go to playing it on your horn with the recording. Then finally, we're going to move to our horn without the recording. So again, we have to create that feeling of swing. We're not relying on the recording there to help us. We've really internalized that information, and then we can create it on demand. If you take those steps and really work on this stuff in a systematic way, whether it be a stylistic thing like this, or whether it be a particular lick or a solo or a tune that you're working on, you're going to have a high level of confidence when it comes to play when it's just you. Obviously, we're not here playing with recording when we're performing. We've got to actually be able to have that stuff floating around in our mind, especially when it comes to improvising. I find that many players know a lick, as far as yeah, I can play this when I'm practicing it in terms of an exercise, or I can plug it in. But when it actually comes time to play, that information doesn't come out in their playing, because maybe they haven't spent that time to actually internalize it where it's really a part of them. It's not just sort of something that I practiced and yes, I know what it is, but you've really internalized it. So it's just absolutely automatic when it comes time to perform. So that is kind of the like us component of listening. There's a lot of other things we can worry about when we're listening that are going to help improve our musicianship that we want to practice as well. So let's check out another example from this tune. This is sort of like the quiet shout section of this tune. I wouldn't say actually all of it is all that quiet, but at least starts quiet. So let's give this a listen, and I specifically want you to listen for what the drums are doing in the breaks. The band is sort of like playing a figure, and then there are some sort of classic Basie style fills in between the figures. Check out this drum fill. And this one. One more. Cool. So we as horn players, we tend to struggle playing the rests. When we have rests, we don't count. This might be when we're soloing, definitely when we're playing an ensemble chart here. So we need to learn to think like a drummer in those rests. And to do that, you got to pick up on a little bit about what the drummer is actually playing. So on this recording, this is Harold Jones, who's not necessarily, I would say, one of the like classic Basie drummers that people think of. It's not Sonny Payne, it's not Papa Joe Jones. That type of stuff. But I really love the way he plays on this again. Very much a blueprint for how we play this style. So we want to think about what are those little drum fills that we hear in some of those gaps. In the first fill, we are coming from an eighth note line in the horns. And then drums plays 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1. But there are a couple of little ghost notes in there that actually set up a triplet subdivision. So it's 1, 2, 3, da-do-do-da. And that's what we want to hear in our head. So if we're playing that figure right there, we've got da do 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 da do 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 da da do do da da do dit da, so on and so forth. You've got to hear that in your head when you are going to play this item. So that way you're always going to be on time, and that way you also know at least a little bit about what the drummer might play. A good drummer is almost always going to play that setup on beat 1, so we can know right where the and of 1 is. If we continue through the rest of this phrase, we have another drum fill just a couple measures later. So our horn figure is da da do da dow, and then the drums have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2 and 3 and 1. There's a saxophone hit on the and of 3 here that the drums catch. So for us, I think, again, really thinking about the triplet subdivision that is implied by what the drums are playing, whether they fully play triplets or not. There's lots of other drum fills in here where he is totally playing triplets the whole time, just across the kit. But I really think we want to think about that triplet subdivision the entire time. So if we were to sing this and really practice this in this fashion, we might sing from the beginning of this phrase, da da do da dow, sha do la do da da do, and so on and so forth through the rest of the eighth note line. So really getting that da do la do la do la do la do la triplet 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 feel going, so that way in any rest we have that triplet subdivision going. So we're always going to be right in the pocket when we come back in. We can get this via listening and then moving it onto our instrument. So what about improvisation then? Obviously, that's all related to the stylistic elements, and specifically stylistic elements of playing in a big band and playing in a Basie style. But all these same concepts and that way of approaching practice, where I go from sort of like a big picture of listening, a little more detailed to, in this case, what were the articulations, and then carrying that over to our horn. Same thing for us as improvisers. Yeah, we want to identify, oh, well, that's a blues lick, that's a 2-5-1 lick, whatever. But don't stop there. Think about like, okay, well, what actually is this blues idea? What makes it tick? What is it as far as how it works with the music theory? Where does it work in the tune? Why does it work in the tune? Same thing with the 2-5-1 idea. Where does it work? Why does it work? Can I then extrapolate that? Can I sing these things before I get them on my horn? If you do those things, you're always going to be in a positive place from a practicer. You know, this is the key elements of practicing, of hearing something, working on the details, getting it internalized, and then trying to recreate it, at least from an improvisational way, hopefully in a new and fresh way that really has meaning to you. Cool. We'll see you in the woodshed.